rev up your engines. Today I'm going to talk about 5 of the worst car engine designs ever made. Now as time goes on, things have gotten more complicated. They started simple. In my grandfather's day, he was a mechanic who was born in the late 1800s. The Model T Ford was king. It was a pretty simple vehicle with a pretty simple engine. And yeah, since the metallurgy wasn't as good back then, hey, the engines needed to be overhauled quite a bit. But it was inexpensive. Many guys were able to do it. But modern cars, we're talking about uber complex machines. If you want to overhaul a modern engine in a car, you can easily spend anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000. So it's something that you want to avoid at all costs. It's a bad engine. Chevy 2.2 liter Ecotec 4-cylinder engine. Now, this engine was designed with the Germans from Opel helping GM. A relatively complex design that put out a lot of horsepower for a small engine. So it was an extremely tightly designed engine. But that led to its downfall. That and the fact that Americans often did not take care of their cars all that well, because they had massive problems with timing chain failure on those things. I had a bunch of my customers with them. They either towed them in because they didn't run anymore, or they came in clanging like mad, and I'd have to say, gee, I'm sorry, you know, the engine's gone kaput because the timing chain assembly's all knocking holes and things, and they just weren't worth the money to repair at the age of the vehicle, and they just ended up junking them. The biggest design flaw, from what I can understand, is that the timing chain tensioner pulley didn't have enough oil in it at idle, so at idle it didn't get enough oil pressure. Things started to come apart after that. If you have overhead cam engines and you don't get enough oil feeding them, hey, they're going to self-destruct. That's why the older engines actually lasted longer, because they were pushrod engines and the cam was in the middle of the engine where there's more oil than at the very top, where if there's an oil supply problem, the top's going to run dry and the cams are going to go pfft. And on this overhead cam design, what's called an interference engine, something goes wrong with the cam timing, boom, the valves hit the pistons, goodbye engine basically. So especially if you're the type of person that doesn't maintain a car well, changing the oil all the time, using quality oil and quality filters, stay away from an Ecotec engine, because it's just flirting with disaster if you don't take care of those really well. Bad engine design is the Audi 1.8 turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. Now here again, a lot of the problems with this Audi Turbo 4, maintenance related, because there's a big argument now, but a lot of people are saying Audi and Volkswagen, they use these in Volkswagens too, same company really, Volkswagen owns them. They didn't tell them that, hey, they have to use synthetic oil. So a lot of people use normal oil, but they went to the synthetic oil change interval. They were changing them like every 10,000 miles, and sludge built up inside the engines. These engines were produced from 1997 to 2004 and were in a ton of Volkswagen and Audi products. It gave them a really bad name, especially since they were turbocharged. Turbochargers, after all they do is they ram more air in, so that's the same as increasing the compression pressure inside the engine cylinders. The more pressure, the more sludge and buildup, faster the engines are going to go out. I've seen tons of them either be on their last legs burning oil like mad and knocking, or they just give up the ghost and they lock up and they don't run anymore. Now these 1.8 turbo engines also had frequent coil pack failure, and so they'd run crappy a lot. Now that's not that big of a deal to a mechanic like me. I just get out my scan tool and I can see the coil packs aren't firing and I'd replace them. And since I know those were bad, if customer had problems, I'd just buy all 4 aftermarket and put them on. And in this case, the aftermarket ones were actually built better than the ones that Volkswagen Audi put on them in the first place. Now the next bad engine is the Chrysler 2.7 liter V6 engine. What a clunker. They had so many bad designs, it's hard to cover them in a short video like this, but one of their big ones was the stupid water pump was driven by a timing chain, and you had to take the whole engine apart and even the crossover pipe of the exhaust system in order to change that stupid water pump. And it wasn't something you could kind of leave alone, because since the water pump was driven by the timing chain, guess what? If that water pump actually snapped off and the bearing went, there goes the timing chain, pistons hit the valves, there goes the engine. What a stupid idea. You know, the old cars, hey, they all had the fan belt, running the water pump on the outside of the engine. Sometimes you could change them in 15, 20 minutes. Even the hard ones might have taken an hour or two, but if they broke, it didn't destroy the engine. It just overheat. You see the temperature gauge go up and you turn the car off. And they broke on these Chrysler engines. Kaboomy, there goes the engine. It's too late then. Even a crankcase ventilation system was designed wrong on this. And a lot of them, they'd let the sludge get into the engine. Then, of course, that would clog up the engine and they'd lose oil pressure and the engines would blow. I saw that tons of times. And interestingly enough, the history of this engine was one of their guys, Francois, he decided that Chrysler needed a lightweight, efficient, modern aluminum V6 engine to give Chrysler a reputation of quality and modern design. Boy, did they mess up on that. It gave them a reputation that went down the toilet. Cadillac V8 6.4 that could turn the cylinders on and off, activate them, not activated. Whew, was that a clunker? Now sure, the electronics back in 1981 when they were making these things was really lacking for activating and deactivating the cylinders. They do have a modern version, somewhat better than the older one, but still, I've got customers with them and they haven't been happy with them. A lot of them pay a mechanic to disconnect that system and just go back to a normal V8 engine. And in the case of this cylinder deactivation engine from 1981, hey, it was a throttle body fuel injection. It was basic fuel injection. Bad electronics and a basic fuel injection system, those things were horrible. It would mess with their acceleration, making it shut off when it shouldn't, or not shutting it off when it should. Customers of mine that had those things, they just ended up hating those cars. And since that fuel injection system was so basic, they had some serious problems of, first, when they shut off, they would not have enough fuel and they would run too lean, and then when they turn on they would run too rich, so you get herky-jerky motion. I mean, you don't buy a V8 engine vehicle to get herky-jerky motion. It was just a really stupid idea that GM actually produced. Now the last bad engine design I'm talking about today is the Mazda 1.3 liter rotary engine. Basically it was an interesting design that failed. I remember when I was a young mechanic, Mazda came out with this Cosmos, and they had a little bitty rotary engine that they said, yeah, it puts out a lot of power and it can run on any kind of fuel. But there was real drawback, well, more than one. But the main one was, yeah, it was a tiny little engine. And yes, that little 1.3 liter engine put out a lot of horsepower, but it got horrendous gas mileage. I knew guys with these Cosmos, and they were getting like 4 or 5 miles a gallon in this tiny little car. And the real kicker was the seals on those engines. They're rotary engines, and they have like a triangular rotor, and each corner there's an apex seal. And those seals all wore out. And one of the biggest things that happened to them was absolutely hilarious, because the seals didn't work right, and gasoline, a lot of it got by the seals. So almost every single one of them, when you turned it off, you'd wait a few seconds and you'd hear bang. The onburn gasoline would get into the exhaust system and then it would explode. And most of them turned into tremendous oil burners too. One of the reasons was actually the design of the vehicle. They found out that those apex seals would wear out. So they actually had an oil injection system, almost like a 2-stroke motor, where they would spray oil in the engine when you accelerated so it would lubricate the seals. Well, then you're burning oil. Of course, this made them very hard to get to pass US emissions, and as they aged, they wouldn't pass the emissions anymore because all that burning oil had ruined the catalytic converters. They kept trying to fix it by changing designs, but even in the end, RX-8, and they had engine failure all the time too. Often around 80,000 miles, the engines would just give up the ghost. And the older rotary engines Mazda had, they used to flood out all the time. I had people tow them here all the time, and the engine was flooded out, and I'd have to take the spark plugs out, dry them, and big hullabaloo to get them running again. And then later, they'd flood out again. It was just basically a bad design to put in a car. These Wankel rotary engines have a great power to weight ratio. And if you want to put them in a light aircraft, and rebuild the engine all the time. Hey, they can be great for that. But for a car you're going to drive every day down the road, it's a stupid idea. And hopefully no one will ever come back with it again. So now you know 5 bad engine designs to stay away from. And hey, who knows what the future will bring. Maybe they'll make some more like variable compression engines or gasoline engines that are self-igniting, that don't use spark plugs. They're working on those, but boy, they've already got teething problems on the gasoline ones already from what I've read. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.